Good morning.
Hey, good morning to you. How are you? Or
I'm
good
great.
afternoon, right?
It is afternoon. Yeah, it feels like fall here. Like I woke up and actually all night it was that really wild wind where you feel like your house might blow over
Yeah.
or the blinds might get ripped off the windows. And it's just been that way all day. And it's amazing to see how quickly the leaves turned yellow like last week and now they're all gone.
Oh,
So I
really?
feel like we're sitting in the middle of fall. And we just shared this article that Jen O'Sullivan wrote a few, I guess it was 2 falls ago already, about Chinese medicine and the fall and the things you can do in the autumn. And so I've been thinking of her article all day long because it feels really like in my senses right now.
Mm. Yeah, fall. I have family members that enjoy it immensely. I do in the beginning, and then I'm ready for summer again. But it's been nice here. It was like almost 80 degrees all week last week, and then this week it was chilly in the beginning, but it's warmed up again. So our leaves are still hanging on for dear life here in northeastern Pennsylvania.
Well, enjoy them. I'm sure they're gorgeous because you guys are that close to New England too, that you get all of that foliage.
Yeah, we get it. It is pretty. I must, as a summer guy, I must admit it is very beautiful.
Are you from there originally?
Yep. Yep. Born and raised here in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, for better or for worse.
So you and Sarah and Jen are all roughly from that part of the state. Is that
This
right,
part of
Sarah?
the, yeah, no,
Mhm.
NEPA. They call it NEPA around
Nipa.
here. Yeah. So we're all from the NEPA.
Paula lives here, but she's not originally from here, I don't think. I forget where she's. I feel like she's. I should know this. And Gretchen lives here. She's not originally from here either, though.
Where's
Yeah,
Gretchen
Gretchen.
from?
I think
She's
Philly,
from
right?
upstate New York, right?
Oh, okay.
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 Yeah, I'm pretty
That's
sure
right. And
upstate
she
New York.
lived in Philly for a while. She worked in Philly.
Yeah.
That's right.
But now
Yeah,
Paula has family in Chicago, but that's not where she's from, right? They just ended up there.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, well, let's ask her when she pops in because I'm having a hard time remembering. Because I know she went to Duke. I know she's from Philly.
Okay. I
Yeah,
feel like her accent is her tiny little accent is Philly.
yeah, I'm almost certain she's a Philly girl.
We had some friends here. Sorry, I'm just going to let in. I think here's Paula and Mike. Friends here who had come from the States, but I didn't know where they were from. And the first time we had dinner with them, the wife said she was going to go get some water. And I was like, I know where you're from.
We have, and Sean, you'll know this, but we have a really interesting dialect, like real interesting. There's some little quirky things that are very specific to this area. Um, and one of them is this expression, Hena, like
Oh, geez. Yeah.
Hena?
Hena. So like if
Ain't it or not?
yeah, like so it's like, oh, this weather's really beautiful, Hana. Like it's this, and I will say that I feel like our generation is like phasing it out, but it's
Right.
it's like a prominent, like very like you don't hear it anywhere else. And we were at, a bunch of my friends when we were like in our, we were probably 19. We were in Tennessee at a music festival, and my friend Tip was like standing around this table looking at like who knows what, like probably buying glass pipes or something, who knows.
Yeah.
And like 3 people down, he heard someone say Hana, and he like leaned over the table and he was like, "Are you from northeastern Pennsylvania?" And she was like, "Yes." Like she was from, like Pittston or something. But Hana or no.
Paula, we were trying to figure out where you're from. Are you a Philly girl originally? You're muted.
I grew up outside Philadelphia.
Okay.
So Philadelphia, Chicago for 10 years, and now here for 20.
But you didn't pick up any Chicago.
Oh, I hope not.
No, you don't have that.
I don't think I'm heavy Philly, but some things my kids make fun of me. Chocolate and chicken. They say I say funny.
Okay. I hear a tiny bit, but nothing completely that would
My
indict
brother,
you.
And my brother-in-law says water.
Yeah. We were just talking about my friend in Switzerland who said water. And I was like, I know exactly where you're from. I was born in Minnesota and South Dakota. So when I was little, well, I lived in South Dakota till I was 6. I had a little bit of that Fargo sort of Minnesotan accent, but I can't even fake it anymore. They say ope a lot, which is kind of like Hena, I guess, ope. So go figure. Anyway.
Oh.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, I'll wrap this up, I promise, but there's this one article, and I'll have to find the link where you can, I think it's New York Times, you can take the test and it will tell you according to your dialect where you're from or where you've lived. And it's remarkable how spot on it is. So I'll see if I can find it.
Awesome. I was not aware of having any sort of an accent until I lived in Colorado, actually. Because I didn't hear a difference with how they were speaking.
But they heard your
But
accent.
they said they were like, oh yeah, you're definitely.
I was definitely Midwestern shamed when I moved to Delaware for college. I remember very clearly freshman orientation, and they brought out lunch, and I said something about, I'll have a pop. And they looked at me like, what? I've never made that mistake again. And then I was, well, I don't drink soda anymore either, but I wouldn't say pop if I could. And then I was in a criminal justice 101 class, and we were talking about crime. And I said something about the roots of crime. And like, I've never been more embarrassed, the roots. So anyway, that's part of our bodies too. So there's an awkward segue into talking about mindfulness of the body, because the way we speak and the way we communicate, those are very embodied experiences. So I'm gonna start the slides where we left off last week. And actually, before I share the screen, I want to mention before I forget, Sarah and Mike have a board meeting next Thursday right after this. So they likely will not be able to come to our Sangha. So we have an option of doing it without them, or just pausing next Thursday and all of us coming back together. It would be Thursday, November 4th. I'm inclined to go for that latter option, just because, yeah, it feels sad to lose 2 of our 6 people. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to also ask if even perhaps Wednesday might work instead, so we don't have to miss a week.
Wednesday might work if I can get somebody to pick up my kid for that last half an hour. Why don't I check on that and I'll get back to you guys. Does it work for everybody else?
Yes.
Yeah. Let me just double check before I.
Yeah, it would be Wednesday, 8:30 a.m.
Oh, Rachel, you and I have a meeting.
Oh, you and I have a meeting already. Yeah, that's right. And then you have a marketing meeting right after, I think. I saw that on the calendar.
Oh, I just wanted Rachel, to make you aware, I'm headed out on vacation November 3rd or 2nd, and I'll be gone for 2 weeks with no cell coverage.
Good for you.
Oh, how delicious.
Good for you, man.
That sounds like a real vacation, like capital
Yes.
V.
It's a solo wilderness sojourn.
Oh,
Oh, Mike, I didn't know you were going solo.
That's
Oh, yes.
amazing.
Oh my gosh.
That's
Where are you
amazing.
going?
You're so brave.
Northeastern Wyoming.
Wow.
So like Devil's Tower, Black Hills, that area.
Yeah. Oh, that's an epic area. It's so beautiful.
I've never been. I spent a lot of time on the Rocky side, also solo. But I try to do this every year or so, and just
It
pick an
sounds
area
like-
I've never been, drop myself off, and a week later pick myself up and go home.
Okay, so after you do that, then you can teach the rest of the mindfulness lessons,
Right.
because you're going to learn everything you need to learn, I think, doing that.
So I have I would never, oh my gosh, I'd never proffer that, but I have an essay that I'm trying to work on how the senses change, going from, urban or semi-urban living to essentially the way we lived, for most of our human existence as a species,
Mhm.
and just sort of how the senses tune differently. And I've had it happen several times where, you drive down the road, you see trees, And then you come out of the woods and you drive down the road, you see animal trail, animal, this happening, that happening. And you could be doing 60 miles an hour and you see all of it. It's a very different, it's a different perception after a week.
Absolutely. And probably it takes a few days to get used to your phone not pinging every 5 minutes.
Or every shadow at night thinking that it's going to be something that eats you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting timing. So that's the second you leave, because our next lesson actually involves the 4 elements. So we dive into water, air, earth, and fire, and then we do a whole 4 elements meditation. But you leave on Tuesday, the 2nd of November?
I think so.
Okay.
I have to be in South Dakota to pick up a friend for, we're doing a friends thing for the first, I don't know, 4 days. So he flies in, I think, to Sioux City. And so I may be able to make the 4th, since given the time change.
Okay, that's right. Okay, well, let's look at our calendars and I'll send out some potential dates too, because it would be nice to connect one more time to make sure we get at least one more lesson in with you before you go.
Yes, I would.
If people have space.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I don't want to impose on anyone's schedule, please.
Well, I'm thinking of South Dakota, and I lived there a long time ago, but the Badlands are also, I mean, totally striking. That's there with the Black Hills. And it's an interesting time of year to be there too, because hopefully it won't be snowing yet, but it'll be nice and spare in that most like beautiful of ways.
Like pretty desolate.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Right
they have snow
on.
in Wyoming, so I'm anticipating this is going to be a week of living on snowpack. So we'll see.
That's really cool. Okay, the other question, and then I promise we'll move on, is have you read Into the Wild by John Krakauer?
Oh, yes.
Okay, I was going to say, if you're doing this trip, surely you've read it already. Okay, yeah, he's great.
He's fantastic. The other one I'd recommend if somebody was interested is Robert Kull's Solitude.
How do you spell his last name?
I think it's Kull. And he
Kull.
is, he's just an amazingly thoughtful individual who really reflects rather harshly on his own life, but goes and spends a year alone in the Patagonian wilderness with his cat. And, it sort of chronicles his trials and tribulations, but the mental journey through all of that is, and how he documents it is it's really quite beautiful.
What's the name of the book?
Solitude.
Solitude. I almost wrote isolation. I was like, that's not right.
Yeah.
It's not
Not
quite as
far off.
poetic. It makes me think of like Edward Abbey with Desert Solitaire. And gosh, there's so many good ones. I took a class as an undergrad on religion in the American wilderness, and you would have loved it. I mean, it was all stories like this of people who ventured out in isolation in nature and how they had mystical experiences or didn't. Or, I mean, I wish I could find that syllabus.
Yes, please.
It was from
Find a syllabus, that would be great.
1998, but I'll see what I could do.
Well, I guarantee you it hasn't changed.
All right, yes, that's the blessing of Earth, right? It doesn't change as much as technology and everything else. All right, so jumping in, we'll share the screen and I will get back to you on potential rescheduling here. Signed out. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, I'm going to stop share while I sign in. Sorry about that, guys. And Mike, we will record all of these. So hopefully you can eventually catch up with anything you've missed, but it's more important that you're doing what you're doing. Okay, I'm just going to pull us up and then we're ready to go. So we left off roughly here, talking about the body as mind. Whoops, I don't want to share. Sorry, guys. Talking about the body as mind taxi and this idea that oftentimes we can live in our heads. I'm getting feedback from somebody. I'm just going to mute you guys. Okay, there we go. And feel free to unmute if you want to say anything. So many of us live in our heads, kind of cut off from or unaware of the mystery. And that word mystery, I think of this adventure Mike's going to have. The awe, the wonder, and the complexity of the body and the world around us, and its tremendous capacity to serve us. I don't love that word serve. I prefer the word like partner. Its capacity to be our companion, our source on this journey through life. So if this is you, welcome to the club, and just be gentle with yourself, especially as we move through any of this. If you find that some of this conversation is triggering, that's super normal as well. Stepping back or closing your eyes or muting me or taking a deep breath or walking away, that's all absolutely a great way to care for yourself. So this is where we left off in a really rich conversation last week, looking at all of the ways in which maybe we have a complicated relationships with our bodies. The body is a problem, as a source of dissatisfaction to be fixed or changed or remedied, an enemy versus an asset, a friend or a source of support, something we feel ashamed of, or something we need to control or manipulate or alter. And I want to talk really briefly about the notions of body positivity and body neutrality. Body positivity is about 25 years old, roughly, we can kind of trace it to 1996-ish. And if you look at the table here, it's the idea of really promoting strong self-esteem, encouraging all of us to love our bodies, and encouraging others to care for their bodies. If you search the hashtag body positive on Instagram, you will find a plethora of material here. It's very stylish these days to be body positive, which is great. However, in recent years, a new approach has sort of emerged, which is not sort of this forced positivity. It is rather a neutral approach that emerged around 2015. So that instead of focusing on loving your body no matter what, body neutrality is a philosophy that focuses more on what your body can do for you and on meeting your body with acceptance. So I feel like this concept is really fundamentally Buddhist, because a lot of what we do in Buddhism is practice accepting what is, looking at life today and saying, okay, this is how life is. Now, where do we go from here? And so neutrality would emphasize more what your body can do throughout the day, the wonderful sort of miracle of moving through the world. It encourages mindfulness. So again, letting go of the binary of good or bad, right or wrong, and focusing on the body as a vessel, as a living container that's capable of so much rather than what it looks like superficially, especially according to someone else's needs. Now, for me, this really rings true because in yoga and mindfulness, especially sort of the pop mindfulness that we see on social media, there can be a tendency towards spiritual bypassing, which is this idea that we can use spiritual concepts to kind of force our way through difficult emotions or around difficult emotions or stuff difficult emotions away rather than actually feeling them. So body neutrality, I think, makes some more space to avoid that sensation of spiritual bypassing. Because if you're feeling crummy in your body one day, you can say, okay, isn't this interesting? I feel really, really down about this, rather than saying, I have a great body, it's perfect, I love it forever, and kind of pushing our way through the very real continuum of feelings that we sometimes have about our bodies. So this is a little illustration I found that I thought was thought-provoking. So on the left, we have body neutrality. Somebody saying, I really love my legs because they help me run. And on the right, body positivity. I love my legs, cellulite and all, they are beautiful. So these are two approaches to healing our relationship with the body. And some might serve folks at different seasons and in different times of their lives. And that's fine. Mike, did you want to say something?
Kind of segue into sort of the diet and weight loss industry.
Completely, yes.
Yeah. And this is more of that and more very positive pushback to the traditional messaging around the diet and weight loss industry. Sort of based around this, right? It's, I think you were seeing a bit of a whipsaw too, where it's like, oh, accept even unhealthy practices. And I think it's getting kind of rolled into that as well.
There's definitely a push now towards saying health is all sizes,
Mhm.
and we can really consciously let go of the idea that everybody should have one shape or size of a body,
Mhm.
because there might be people who are in one kind of particular body that looks superficially healthy, but they're actually quite ill because of their lifestyle or their behavior or whatever. So yeah, this is another topic that we could spend just 6 months talking about.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think sometimes in meditation and mindfulness, we can be so caught up in thinking about thoughts that the body is kind of an afterthought. And so this conversation about positivity versus neutrality feels like a way to kind of apply some of those fundamental mindfulness concepts to the way, the relationship we have with our bodies every day. Anybody have any other thoughts or anything that comes up in talking about this?
Well, I just think admittedly, like, I don't know, there's different people, I guess, at different times of their life see their bodies in different ways, and especially as you grow older, and perhaps you get out of shape a little differently, and that impacts you even physically differently than it did when you were younger. And so if the truth is told, we probably all think about it a little more than we want to admit. And it might not be around vanity necessarily, or even like, oh, do I fit well into these clothes? Although that's definitely a part of it. But for me, it's like, there's two things that happen for me. Like, so let's just say I'm wearing something and it doesn't quite fit, and I feel insecure that I'm not portraying my best self in that way. And then the other thing is really that gets me is around performance. So if I can't perform a task the way I used to be able to perform it, that bothers me. Not that I'm ashamed of my body, but that it's just a reminder that, like, I'm not what I used to be physically, and that this isn't, unless I do something about it, it's not going to change. So those are the two things that happen, for me. And I don't want to, like, it doesn't consume me, but in the moments that it bothers me, it does bother me.
I echo that, what you said, Sean. I think it's part of the aging process too. And you wake up and you're like, oh, that's different now.
Yeah. Yeah. They said when you turn 40, it changes, and they were not lying. I don't know what scientific study that was, but it was the truth.
Well, it's interesting because I'm hearing two things in what you just said that kind of tie into what we've talked about. And one is impermanence, this realization that as we age, it's like, oh shit, yeah, this body is very different from the one that I knew 20 years ago. And it's different from the one that I might know if I'm lucky enough to still be alive in 20 years. So it's, again, that bittersweet melancholy flip side of impermanence. When have been thinking a lot lately about that, saying that youth is wasted on the young. You know,
Yeah.
that you see pictures of yourself when you're 18 and you're like, oh man, I was hot and I didn't even know it. and the fact that as we age and time passes, there's that, I think there's a grieving that comes with it that maybe we don't always talk about, because in this culture, and this gets back to capitalism from last week, there's this constant effort to cling to that young body or that young face. And so we shoot Botox in our foreheads, or we diet ourselves into starvation so that we can look like the 20-year-old version of ourselves. So all this acceptance of impermanence and change is kind of baked in, and yet most of us spend our lives resisting it. So the other thing that what you said, Sean, tied into what we talked about in the last few sessions is gentleness. And that's where I feel like, too, pulling from the mindfulness tradition, this emphasis always on tenderness and gentleness. And Mark Epstein is a New York City-based teacher, and he's a Buddhist teacher and a psychologist. And he talks about how meditation is like a process of reparenting ourselves. So we're learning to change the voices that are inside. Like Jess, you talk a lot about the inner committee, right? The voices. And so if maybe we grew up in a family that didn't speak gently about their bodies, or they were really critical about their bodies, or you had a mom who told you were fat when you're 10, and so you've never lost that, like that's where this gentleness and this reparenting come in, because we're literally like rewiring the samskaras, the grooves, the mental sort of patterns that we've developed, especially in relation to our bodies since we were children. And Paula, did you want to say something?
So much, but it's okay.
Bring it on. I feel like I jumped in and you were ready.
No, we're kind of away from it. Just, you know, really, I could go on for hours about this. I had that mom.
Yeah. I think a lot of us had that mom.
Yeah. Well, in fact, my mom is 77 and she's still losing weight. I'm like, seriously?
Mm.
Like the other day, I was like, Mom, are you okay? You're really thin. And she said, oh, I just stopped eating the things I love. I'm like, you're 77 years old. Eat the things you love.
You want to write that book? That can really be a book. We're talking about joy for our social media content for November. And I feel like that ties right in there. Like you're 70 years old, eat the things you love. Joy. All right, good. Well, I'll share again. Sorry, I couldn't completely see all your faces and we couldn't see one another. Oh no, where did it go? Okay, guys, let me rescue Chrome just a second. There we go. Now I just need to find you all again. Sorry. Okay. So the body as an afterthought. So many of us maybe struggle to see or recognize the body as a life-giving asset. It's always in communication with us. The question is, do we listen or do we sort of plow forward without listening? And the mindful question that we can start to ask ourselves is, how can we listen more tenderly? So I would say too, just as you brainstorm here, what are some ways in which your body communicates with you? Your body may not have a voice explicitly, but maybe when you're exhausted, maybe when you have indigestion, there's something you've been eating every day and you can't figure out why your stomach hurts. And then you realize, dang, it was those chia seeds. And then you stop eating them and your body tells you, yes, you figured out. So that's one way to communicate, having pain, anxiety. This is another way that the body and the mind sort of work together sometimes to communicate. Skin conditions. Maybe if you're stressed or you're grieving, you break out in hives. PTSD is something that is often showing up as an embodied experience. Can you guys think of any other ways in which your body might communicate?
Sleep or lack thereof.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Doing something that's causing it not to be able to sleep.
And that's a huge one because we know more and more how essential sleep is to everything else.
Very present right now.
Brad Stulberg is a writer and he writes a lot for Outside magazine, but he also ties in sort of notions of groundedness and mindfulness and just really does great work. But he also ties in a lot of sort of how important it is to move your body. And he's a great Twitter follow if anybody's on Twitter, but he has a new book called The Practice of Groundedness. And his approach is really no BS. But one of the things he emphasizes the most is sleep and how essential it is and how everything falls apart when we're not getting enough. And that even if we say, I'll get 5 hours tonight and then I'll be okay, that it takes so long for the body and the mind to recover.
From aches and pains too, from headaches to body aches to everything.
Hair falling out,
Mm.
hair turning gray. I heard from a
Hey,
number of
come on,
friends.
that's not
whose-
cool.
Oh, no, I know, I've got it too. But a lot of friends I know went super gray over the course of 2020 because the pandemic, something about the pandemic, like the stress hormones, the cortisol, whatever it is, sent that message.
I'm
Sunburn.
thinking about, what's that?
Sunburn.
Oh, sunburn's a good one.
Yeah,
I'm thinking
that's really
about which some of us will understand, like how for anyone who menstruates, like how your cycle is like constantly communicating different things throughout the month.
And how hormones are so intricately tied to emotions
yeah.
and thoughts. You
Mhm.
can't separate the two. I've been spending time teaching 13-year-old boys yoga on Monday nights. I mean, the power of hormones. Wow. It's just amazing to see how they show up in bodies that move and the way they speak. And it's incredible. So this body that communicates with us often in ways we don't listen to. You know, I think about all the times I pushed through for a workout when I was weak or hungry or tired and my body should have rested, but instead I said, no, I'm going to do this. I think that's a really common thing, especially amongst folks who do things like power yoga or run marathons. You know, how many times do we push through instead of listening? How many times do we have that fourth cup of coffee instead of taking a nap? Sometimes we don't have the choice to listen to the body, right? So cultivating that as an active practice when we're able. And so the bottom line is the body can be a tremendous resource, teacher, and ally. And so that's really the project of this, is learning to reframe the body as a friend and as a teacher. So to choose to really befriend it and treat it with the same kindness we would treat a loved one. Oftentimes, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I have a question. So when I'm just reflecting on what you said about hormones and emotions being so like tied together. So would emotions be like, would we say emotions are part of like body awareness or mental awareness?
I think they're too interwoven in that case to
Okay.
separate.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
because they are embodied and they are mental. And this is where mindfulness, I think, becomes so helpful, because if you begin this practice of witnessing your emotions instead of being stuck in the waves as they're wild and tumultuous, you can step back and say, oh, isn't that interesting? This might have something to do with progesterone right now. And maybe it's not just me feeling crazy, you know. So to offer just that ability to witness and to be the observer, I feel like might be a tactic to help surf those more intense waves.
Great. Yeah, that's interesting.
That
Great.
would be really interesting research to read more on, though, because I'm sure they know a lot more now than they did even, 30 years ago about that.
Right. Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
When I was first married, my husband and I would get in a fight every Thursday night. And finally, we realized I was just so tired that I was picking a fight on Thursday nights. So I went to sleep early.
Wow. Every
Yeah.
Thursday.
Yeah. I was working Sundays. So Sunday to this stuff. It was crazy.
That was your weekend.
That was my weekend.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Interesting.
I mean, there's a reason that one of the torture tactics is to deny people sleep.
Yeah.
They, I mean, it's a proven way to make people literally insane. I think a lot about the first year of my son's life when I really struggled with postpartum depression. And now that I look back, I think it wasn't that anything was wrong necessarily. Yes, I was quite isolated and that made it hard, but it's the fact that I was never sleeping. I was nursing him. I was up every hour. I never slept. And so I think we pathologize some of these things when in fact our bodies just need rest. And that's why, we've talked about the nap ministry and things like this. They're so powerful because they're the antithesis of the capitalist ethic that says work, 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 hustle. If you get up at 4 a.m., you're doing it. That's it. And the revolutionary nature of these messages, these self-care sort of teachings is time out. There's a different way. And if we can get the rest, we have that much more to give. So, and that really comes back to this whole ethos of Studio B, that's self-care is collective care. That, Paula, if you get enough sleep, you're a better wife. And then your husband's a better teacher. And then those college students everybody wins, right? It ripples. So anchoring in the body can be an important anchor when the breath as the anchor is challenging. The body's with us at all times. We can anchor to it at any time and anywhere. So again, here you can think of what Sharon Salzberg said about the breath being the ultimate mobile device. Well, the body is really the same way because we are never not with our bodies. And there are lots of ways to anchor in the body or to use it as a vehicle to calm, to clarity, and to grounding. So that said, we're going to start with a 10-point guided body scan. So you can just start in that comfortable seat, anything that feels good. And settle in. Your feet can be grounded on the floor if you want, or sit in a comfortable sort of cross-legged position or whatever's good. Maybe seated on the edge of your chair, or if it feels better, you might want to support your back by leaning that tall spine against the back of the chair behind you. As always here, eyes closed or gently half open. And I always like to start by softening. So check into anything in your body that might feel tight or tense. And just take a moment to really melting the little muscles around your mouth, your forehead. Dropping into any rhythm of the breath that feels natural here. So we're going to begin this meditation by just noticing the sensations at the top of your head. Simply note what you feel. You might feel vibration or pressure. And now focus your attention on your skull. There might be a sense of pressure or other sensations. Simply be curious about these sensations. If you can, allow any tension you feel here to really gently release. If that doesn't seem possible, just simply notice what it is that you feel. Scan your face area, your forehead, your eyes, and your nose. Notice your cheeks and your mouth. There may be sensations of tingling, temperature, tightness. Let it all be there. Be curious about your experience and begin to notice the sensations in your throat. Now bring your attention to the sensations present in your shoulder area. Notice any tension arising. Sometimes in the act of noticing tension, you may find yourself relaxing. If that's not possible, you can breathe gently, directing the breath to your shoulders. Notice the sensations in your left shoulder, and then bring your attention down your arm. Notice any vibration, tingling, coolness, pressure, or movement in your elbow, your lower arm, and then your hand. Be curious and open to the sensations that are present in your hands and your fingers. Allow your hands to soften and relax. Now bring your attention up to your right shoulder, noticing any sensations that might be present. Start to scan your right arm for vibration, tingling, or movement. Notice your elbow, your forearm, your hands, and your fingers. But if at any point there's no sensation, just notice the absence of sensation. That's okay too. Let your attention go to the top of your shoulders and to your back. Imagine a zigzag sensation or an up and down movement across your back. Can you be open and curious to whatever the experience is? Be kind to yourself, no matter what comes up. Notice your upper back, your mid back, and the sensations in your lower back. If thoughts arise as you're doing this, worries or concerns, see if you can let them go. Let them be like clouds floating in the sky, moving across your mind. Or just come back to my words on this body scan. And now bring your attention to the top of the chest area. Gently scan your chest, your rib cage, and your stomach. See if you can soften your stomach. Think of a Buddha belly, nice and loose, relaxed. Breathe deeply while directing the breath to that area, allowing it to soften and relax. Now notice your pelvic area and the places where your body has contact with your seat. Feel whatever sensations are present. Gently bring your attention to your left hip and down your left leg. Notice the sensations in your thigh. Bring this kind and curious attention to your leg, your knee, and your left calf. Notice whatever sensations are present: vibration, tingling, itching, warmth, coolness, heaviness. Then bring your attention to your ankle, left foot, and toes. Now notice the sensations in your right hip. And again, bring your attention down to your right thigh. You can circle your attention on your right leg or notice it in any other way that makes sense to you. Feel any vibration, tingling, temperature, heaviness, or movement in your knee and calf. Scan your leg down to your right ankle and toes. Now that you've scanned your body, you're welcome to start again. This time you can start at your feet and go back up through your body until you get to the top of your head. Feel free to scan your body up and down as many times as it is helpful to you. We'll take a few final breaths here in stillness. And then as you're ready, and only when you're ready, feel free to open your eyes and come back to the group. So taking plenty of time if you need it. If anybody might want to share how that felt in your body.
I've been dealing with a cold for 2 days, so I recognized pretty quickly that I didn't like want to stay. I didn't want to focus on my body because it's not feeling great right now. Especially when you were guiding us through like the neck and the chest areas, because that's where everything feels kind of tickly and constricted. So the difference, like I was trying very hard to just stay in my body, but my mind was just like, no, let's think about the tasks you have to do after our session, or like it kept taking me away.
That's such a good example of how it's maybe easier to do some of these practices, especially the body positive practices, when our bodies are feeling great and we're feeling great. But then the challenge of meeting ourselves with a stuffy nose or a tired body or a bum low back, and to be with it and not run away from it or numb it or resist it, that's when the practice really gets real.
Yeah, I don't want to, so I'm going to say I didn't like the practice, but it wasn't the practice. I didn't like how I felt because I carry a lot of stress in my body, apparently. And focusing on each like group just reminded me of how stressed I am. So like from head to toe. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that focus. Usually with our bodies versus your mind, with your bodies, if something hurts, you just ignore it, or you just keep pushing whatever it is, what it is. But having to focus on it, I just, everywhere I went, I just felt tight and tense, like all the way down to my feet. So that was bothering me. Yeah, I didn't like the way that felt too much.
Did you find yourself resisting it? Or like, how does when I say
No, I
like, can
found
you be
myself-
friends with that tension? How does
Well,
that feel?
Honestly, I was kind of like mad about it. So I was mad about it because going back to earlier, like, so I sleep well, but because of like depression. So I fall into like a depressed sleep, but my mind is not at rest. My body, I might be sleeping, but my mind is not at rest. So I'm always in a state of being like tense and tired, but you can't stop, right? That's what we talked about before. You can't stop. So you just keep going and you keep going and you keep going. And there's days where I'm like on a weekend where I'm like, I'm going to take a nap today. And then I don't, because I feel guilty because I'm not doing something else that I should be doing. Or even the chaos of a work week and, family stuff perhaps going on or whatever, you can't, you just feel guilty about pausing. There's just so much to do. So I started thinking about those things and I got mad. I was getting mad. I was getting frustrated. So yeah, I don't know if I could be friends. I mean, I've learned to cope with it by ignoring it. I've never really made friends with it, to answer your question. No, I just ignore it. I just was like, so this is what it is, keep grinding, feeling like the solution to my problem would be like, if it was a business problem, sell more stuff, that'll solve it. Or, if you're in the process of selling more stuff, make more calls. Or if it's at home, it's like, all right, do these tasks, get everything done, and then you'll be free. But the problem with that is you're never done with anything because life keeps moving.
And maybe it's too much to ask to be friends with it right now.
Maybe
And
for
that's okay
me,
too.
yeah, maybe for me, but yeah, yeah, I gotta sit with it for a little bit, I think, and kind of think about it. Because the other practices are really comforting. And that one was like shining a light in a dark space.
That's why it's so interesting to me that meditation has this reputation of like being blissed out and peaceful and happy all the time. Like, no, a lot of times we're agitated and uncomfortable and mad and like frustrated. And those feelings are all really real parts of these practices for most of us.
Yeah, I can say that when I first started to practice the body scan, I was really depressed and completely kind of shocked and terrified about how I just was like, oh, I guess, do I have a problem not connecting to my body? Like, I didn't know I had that. And the body scan sort of pointed that out, that I couldn't feel, parts of the body where guidance was telling me to feel. I was like, well, I can't feel that, so I can't feel that. And so it was kind of, I hated the practice. And sometimes I still do. One of the things that helped me, and I'll just share to see if this resonates with anyone, because it kind of loops back to earlier what you were sharing, Rachel, is just this practice of noticing like the quality of the presence, like, or maybe this is where the feeling tones practice really helps me, like the practice of Vedana in Buddhism, like just noticing whether something is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And then how there's two facets to each of those, like the worldly, pleasant. Anyway, I don't need to get fully into that because that's not something, unless people are curious, but it's just that the quality of presence just helps me to, gives me just a bit of space to see how I'm acting toward myself. So it might have that like moment just to see, like, it kind of gives me like a little bit of a choice. Like, do I want to keep this practice? But it's just enough space to take me out of the autopilot, which would be to avoid, and gives me like, okay, I don't like this right now. Yeah, I think the feeling tones practice really kind of sums it up better than what I'm doing right now. But just to say that I too was like, the body scan can just get out of here, throw it in the trash bin.
A lot of judgment came up for me. Feeling my hands on my thighs, which are not the size I'd like them to be. And, all the tension up here, why are you so tense? You shouldn't be so tense. You have such a beautiful life, all that judgment. However, I do body scans a lot lying down, and I find them very blissful lying down. So it's interesting to compare the way, how you're in space and how that feels. And also, I just wanted to point out that Lynette and Regina both have beautiful Yoga Nidra body scans that are really gentle and loving and have helped to befriend. If Sean, especially if you want to check those out, I'll send you the links.
Thank you.
That's so interesting that the experience is quite different depending whether you're seated or you're resting. I relate to the feelings of impatience around it. I mean, that's why I do yoga more than I do seated meditation, because I'm a type A, fiery person. I want to move my body. I want to sweat. I want to do it. I don't want to be still. And so, for me, if you said, okay, Rach, do you want to do a 10-point body scan or do you want to do 15 minutes of vinyasa? I go for the vinyasa anytime because it is less of the having to, how's my elbow today? And oh, there's my ankle. And it's less of that. So I relate to that a lot. The feelings of agitation and irritation and impatience that come up. This particular body scan was one from Diana Winston, who teaches a lot with 10% Happier. And she does some great work. So we have another practice coming up right after this one. But first, before we get to that, really quickly on the body scan, just a few things. You don't need to use all 10 points. I know that I sort of offered a lot of words there, but there were actually 10 points in that practice: leg, knee, left calf, ankle, toes, etc. So if you want to do all those points, you're welcome to. You can do 3 if you have just a few minutes. Maybe you want to choose the crown of your head, your heart, the soles of your feet. You can do 1, maybe just using the soles of your feet as an anchor in a moment that you're feeling anxious. And you have 1 minute before you have to hop on a high pressure call. We're going to do one later that involves just the heart. So we have center ground expand right now, but we have 4 minutes left, and we definitely don't have enough time for this practice. So what I think we'll do is we'll start with this practice next time. I'm going to show you a couple slides that tell us more about center ground expand, and then we'll rewind so that you can see those before we do the practice. So this practice is actually a standing practice. So I'll be interested to know how you feel as opposed to sitting. And it produces actual chemical, hormonal, and neural changes in the body and the mind with just 45 seconds to 2 minutes of coming into the posture. And these shifts create the very felt and embodied experience of being calm, strong, and open. So this kind of a practice might be a useful tool as a formal practice, or maybe to set yourself up for a formal practice if you're on the way. But you could use it. It's a quick meditation, maybe 2 minutes if you do an efficient version. I have a longer version for us to do together here. But you could do it in the bathroom right before you walk into a job interview. Stand in front of the mirror in the bathroom. You could do it before making a public presentation or presenting ideas to a group or a team, or maybe you're a Broadway actor and you're about to go on stage. Like, this is a great practice for grounding. And you could use it before you have to have a difficult conversation, or maybe if you feel nervous about giving feedback or evaluation, navigating a conflict, or diffusing a defensive situation. And this is inspired by, in part by Amy Cuddy. There's Amy, and she wrote this book, Presence. And this book explores the way in which changes in your actual posture impact your physiology. So thus changing the way we think, we act, we communicate, and we relate to one another. And she's very famous for this notion of power posing, right? So think about how your body feels when you stand like this, or when you're hunched over, hands kind of between your legs, chest sort of hidden, back rounded. Notice the difference in your body. So when we practice these power poses, this particular meditation, which focuses on centering, grounding, and expanding, it can become a way of being. So a way of embodying calm and strength and openness. And you can do it seated as well. This is a funny little graphic about Amy Cuddy's power poses. So if you want to be a generic superhero, that's an option. If you want to be raw, feel free. So when we start our next session, we'll drop right into this meditation first thing. And it's something to think about as you move through your world and as you move through your life over the next week. Hopefully we'll find a time to meet again next week. But notice how your body takes up space. This was one of the first things I read in discovering feminist theory when I was like 17. The fact that if you go on a subway and you see a woman seated, she's probably got her legs crossed, maybe her arms are crossed, she's taking up very little space, okay? Or people who are socialized to be women. And a man on the subway might be seated with his legs wide. Think how Donald Trump sits, right? Legs wide, feet on the floor, almost like he's on a toilet, yeah? And his arms on his thighs, his chest lifted. He is owning his space. He's taking up space. So maybe just put on your cultural lenses as you go through life these next few days, notice how for instance, the men and the women in your life take up space, or how the children in your life take up space, because children often fearlessly take up space because we haven't quite socialized it out of them yet. They haven't yet learned how to fit their body into the prescribed behavioral modifications. So consider that your homework. Just be curious and notice how you move in your body, how you sit in your body, and how other bodies kind of move through the world. Cool. I just want to glance at the comments in case I missed anything. Paula has found her toes since doing body scans. Excellent. And Jess, I'll take a screenshot of this about your friend and I'll look her up. Wilderness in the Inner World. That sounds great. Okay, super. Well, I feel like that went by in a flash. And there's so much more we could have talked about for so much longer. So thank you for your time and energy again. And I'll send out an email to see if we could find a time that we might be able to connect next week in lieu of Thursday at this time. Cool.
Sounds
Thanks for
good.
the flexibility, everybody.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm glad you can knock out that board meeting before you head out of town, Mike, and then just completely unplug.
That's the idea. We'll see if it happens.
But yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest
right,
of your
guys.
day.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Everybody.
Bye.
Take care.